Hello and welcome to Cooking Through the Collection. My name is Melissa and I'm a librarian and home cook. I do a lot of research when wanting to expand my repertoire of cooking, and so I've challenged myself to walk through the stacks of my library's cookbook collection and grab things I've never tried before. So let's see what new challenge I've selected this week. So the cookbook that I selected is actually for baking. It's called the Vegan Baking Bible. Over 300 recipes for bakes, cakes, treats, and sweets by Carolina Tegelar. It is a hefty book, but after going through it, I really appreciate it. It actually has whole sections on why vegan baking, which types of substitutes work best for which types of recipes, what the advantages are, how much of something and the difference it makes. It has so many steps. It has photos of examples of the different kinds of flours, different ways you have to work with creaming, different ways of working with moisture in cakes, because all these things change when you don't have dairy and animal products. It talks specifically about things that I am terrified about. One of them, which I will be dealing with spot on, is aquafaba, which I will talk about a little bit later. But this is a beautiful cookbook. I think it's a good mix of photos, but utilitarian. Most of it's in metric, so things are by weight, which is really helpful in baking. And I've learned that when you're doing things with substitutes or things you have not used before, having exact amounts is extremely important. It has cakes, meringues, cookies, pies, breads, curds, waffles. I'm excited to play through this, and I've actually chosen one recipe, which will end up being 3 recipes. I have selected the passion fruit pie, which has its own crust, a passion fruit filling, and a meringue made with aquafaba. I love to bake. I'm a serious baker. This has always daunted me. I can say that my vegan baking experiences have not been great. So this is going to be a challenge, but this cookbook, I feel like I'm going to be the best equipped I have been. So let's get into the kitchen. So today we're making passion fruit pie on page 410. It's one of these recipes that's actually multiple recipes, so I'll be working on it throughout the day. The first part is the pastry case, which I'm guessing is the crust. Interesting the way that it's explained that way. So I'm looking through the ingredients. There's plain flour, which is all-purpose flour, salt, sugar, margarine diced, and 2 to 4 tablespoons of ice cold water. It turns out that I don't have any ice cubes today, so I've actually poured out some water into a container and put it on our covered porch. Hopefully it will be cold enough. One of these things that I remember, I haven't worked with margarine in a very long time. I found one that was one of the recommended ones. It also doesn't have avocado in it. I am fatally allergic, so we're not going to do that. So the one I found, it says great for baking, is Earth Balance Vegan Buttery Sticks. 78% vegetable oil spread. And it says I'm going to need 150 grams. So the first thing I'm going to do is change my digital scale to metric. It looks like this is 112. So I'm going to need to cut a piece. 145. Oh, that was so close. A little bit more. 150 grams. So I'm going to put the margarine back in. So like pie crust, which I make a lot of, the margarine really needs to be very cold. And I know with margarine that it actually melts a lot faster, which actually is why it impacts baking so much. But it says it needs to be diced. So what I'm going to do, I have to unwrap the other pack. I try to keep the butter, or when I'm using solid fats, in their original packaging when I'm cutting, because it means I don't have to clean the cutting board again. So I try to keep it on the paper so I don't have to scrub as much on the cutting board. I also don't want to eat the wrapper. So it says diced. I do the same thing with butter when I make pie crust, so this makes sense. It's easier to, what they call, cut into the flour, so you can get a more even distribution. Oop. It definitely feels more slippery, and I can feel it warming up faster than I normally would. So we're gonna cut the stick in 4s. So I'm getting kind of a playing dice size. I usually find that the easiest to work with. I also have very warm hands, so this recipe is gonna have us working with our hands to cut the fat in, so I'm gonna have to work quickly. So I'm gonna put it in my extremely full freezer. I'm gonna put the plate in, if I can get it to lay flat. Everything in here is metric. A lot of bakers use metric because it is so precise. I know that's why a lot of people hate baking, because it's more science. But then you get to have some creativity at certain points, once you know the basics. Mix the flour, salt, and sugar in a bowl. So I have a metal bowl. I'm gonna turn my scale back on. I'm gonna place my bowl, I'm gonna again change over to metric. Place my bowl on top, and the point that we have what's called tearing the scale, it's zeroing it out so you're not getting the weight of the bowl, and then you have to do math. The bowl is 173 grams. So we're going to zero that out. We need 180 grams of plain flour. I use a spoon even when I'm using a measuring cup, because I like to be able to aerate the flour a little bit so it's not too packed when you're measuring. That's a good tip. Looking for 180. 71, so let's start slowing down. 180. So it says 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon salt. I'm going to put a little bit on the higher end. So that's 1 teaspoon of salt, and then 1 tablespoon of sugar. Actually, it turns out I can't find my tablespoon. It was probably used in a recipe. So I have a teaspoon, and 3 teaspoons is 1 tablespoon. So 1, 2, okay. So I do have my flour, salt, and sugar all mixed in. It says mix them together in a bowl. Add the diced margarine and lightly rub until the margarine is the size of peas. Do not mix for far too long. As I said, I have very warm hands, so that's why I actually usually chill my fat longer, but again, I didn't pay attention, so I'm gonna have to work extra quickly. What I've learned to do is when you're putting in all this fat, kind of make sure you're breaking it up, because if the cubes try to stick to each other, and we don't want them all clumping. The point is to have even distribution. I actually toss the cubes of fat into the flour first so they get a light coating. That seems to give me a little more wiggle room on time with my really warm hands. Sometimes I'll submerge my hands in cold water. So what it is you take the flour, grab onto one of these cubes in between your index finger and thumb, kind of press it so your thumb flattens the piece. So basically I go through all the pieces first, again with some flour, kind of buffering both layers. Because if you don't do that part of covering flour, the more the fat will stick to your fingers. Luckily it's not too warm of a day. If it's a really warm day, I think this would not work as well, unless you have something that's a marble surface or a metal surface to work with. There were lots of different types of margarine and vegan spreads at the store. The really great forward in this book mentioned kind of the things to look for when you're looking for these products. The funny thing is I found all of my products at Walmart. I don't usually shop at Walmart, especially for groceries. That's not where I go. But it actually had all the vegan products compared to some of the other stores, at least the ones that I'm not allergic to. I even got the passion fruit chunks in the freezer section there. So shout out to Walmart to having more of the vegan options. As I make the pieces smaller, it said pea-sized. Kind of think of a garden pea. I'm trying to work quickly. I'm also trying to work with one hand. I would normally work with two, but since I gotta handle the tech here, I don't want flour all over my microphones, because that would be a nightmare to clean. I'm gonna keep working on this, and I'll be right back. So I am back. I ended up using both hands because I just wanted to get done faster, because the longer it sits out, the warmer it gets. So I'm going onto my closed off porch and getting my water. Ice water is better. Sometimes I even store the water in the freezer with the ice in it, but no ice, as I said today. So everything, there are pieces that are size of peas. It doesn't have to be perfect. The different pea size bits are how you get a more flaky crust. It says then add 1 tablespoon at a time until you have a smooth dough. Again, as I have a teaspoon measure, I got to use 3 teaspoons to equal a tablespoon. So that's 1. I use the same spoon I used earlier to measure the flour because, again, lazy. So I can see it start coming together a little bit. Definitely going to be needing more today. It's not as humid. It's actually a pretty cold day. We are starting to go into the warmer season. So this is tablespoon number 2. It's definitely coming together more. The thing I've learned about pie crust is you don't want to overwork it, and 2, you do not want to put too much liquid in it because when it hydrates it will get sticky. So this is now going to be tablespoon number 3. It said 2 to 4, so we'll see. So again, this one is a little bit more by feel out of some of the baking things. It's definitely starting to come together. I'm going to admit, the pie crust that I make in the food processor because I have to make so many crusts and I have to work so quickly. So actually, I'm going to put that last tablespoon in. 3 teaspoons. And it says smooth dough. So once I get this kind of incorporated in with my spoon, I am going to switch to my hand, kind of lightly toss it to see if there's any more water it needs to be incorporated. And then I start lightly squeezing it together in the bowl, kind of like meatloaf, except definitely not meatloaf, especially in vegan baking, but I want it to kind of come together. You want it to not be too wet. I can definitely tell the difference in this compared to butter. It is definitely softer. So we'll see how that impacts it while it rests. So I'm going to pull out a container. What I normally do actually is wrap it in plastic wrap to kind of give it a little bit of pressure. But since it says a container, I'm going to do the container. If I can find the lid. Does anyone else have this lid drama situation here? So I can't find the lid for one of the round ones, so we're going to go for one of the rectangular. So I'm just going to push it out a little bit. What I've also learned is having it at least partially flattened when it's time to roll or press it out definitely gives some help. It doesn't say to do that in the recipe, but I know how this works. And since I know I'm going to have to work faster, I'd rather do that. So put it in the container and I'll be back in a few hours. As I said, this is one of those recipes that's multiple. And so I'll see you guys in a little bit. So we're at the 2-hour mark. Unfortunately, I should have planned more time. Get out the container, roll out the dough on a lightly floured surface, and lay in the pie dish. Okay, that is pretty straightforward. So I still have my container of flour out. I have this cool silicone mat that actually helps me roll out crust a little bit more symmetrically and also doesn't have as much sticking issues. I'm still going to put flour on because, you know, sticking's not good. I'm going to turn out the crust, which is definitely softer. So I think I'm going to have to work faster. And it's also sticking, which is not great. I was hoping it would stay in one mass. So we're going to do some scraping here. Yeah, this is very wet, but I felt like I needed to put the moisture in to get us to the right spot. And then we're going to sprinkle some flour on top of that. I'm going to try to press it back into a disc. It'll make it a lot easier to roll out. So I put a little bit of flour on my rolling pin. I actually have a metal tapered rolling pin. It seems to have less sticking and it also is a little bit colder, so I get a little bit more wiggle room for time to roll out. So what I do is, because I'm trying to keep it somewhat round, I rotate it 1/4 turn and I keep slowly rolling out. You do want to put pressure down, but not too much. If you see the bottom sticking to your mat or whatever surface you're working on, you can definitely give a little zhuzh. If you're seeing that the top is sticking a little bit, just add a little bit more flour. You want to try to have this as evenly as possible, and the rotation helps you control that a little bit. I love making pie crust. Homemade pie crust really does make a difference. It's what I'm also known for now. On Thanksgiving, I bake all the pies. So we're going to just keep rolling. I'm getting close. So you want to have some overhang over your pie pan. This one I have is 10 inches, so roll out a little larger than that. Okay, so what I do to get it in the pie plate is I again flour the rolling pin. I take the crust and I roll it over the rolling pin so I can put it in the plate without trying to rip it. So then we roll it back in, do a little bit of shifting, and then you kind of ease it down. I use the back of my hand to press it into the sides of the pie pan. Make sure you cut all the excess dough. It doesn't say to tuck it under like I do with fluting. So I'm gonna have a little extra pie crust. So I'm gonna get a knife. So I'm gonna cut the excess. So I am gonna have extra dough. Sometimes what I do with extra dough is I brush it with cinnamon sugar and then bake it. It's kind of like a little cookie situation. Highly recommend it. Usually doesn't even make it to my husband. I eat all of it myself. Not sorry about that either. So keep going around. Having a sharp knife is better so you don't tear. But I can definitely tell this is a very, very soft dough, so you need to work fairly quickly. We're almost done cutting the edges. It's not perfect. I have a little bit where I patched that seam, so I'm going to use my thumb, kind of better merge it together. So it looks a little better as well, and kind of smooth the edges of the crust just a little bit so it's more even, and also won't have any spots that are thinner and burn, because I can tell you that's no fun. Okay, I have a perfectly lined pie pan. Make a few holes with a fork. Okay, so what we're doing is called docking. It stops the crust, because we're going to be pre-baking it, from puffing up too much and then you can't put the filling in. So putting these holes in allows the moisture that we've put in to get out, and so we'll have a more even base. It says only put it on the bottom. Okay, so I've made the holes. Freeze the pastry lined pie until it is really cold for at least 20 minutes. So we're going to throw it in the freezer and I will be back shortly. Okay, so I think we're going to be about to be done chilling. So it says freeze until it's really cold. So I'm preheating the 350 now. Then line and fill with either aluminum foil or baking paper, parchment paper, and pie weights, and bake in the center of the oven for 15 minutes. I don't have formal pie weights. However, I have beans that I use when I'm baking pie crusts, and just don't eat them afterwards. So I have my crust. It is very cold. I can't find my parchment paper, so I'm just going to use foil. I'm going to push on the edges as much as I can because we want this to evenly do this. So the reason of the pie weights is to stop the puffing also. So in addition to the docking, the weights will help. So we're going to pour them in. I try to spread them evenly weight-wise, so they're pushing on all the edges, because the foil sometimes will give a crinkle. So I'm pushing them down. And then how long are we going to bake it? We're going to do 15 minutes, and then we'll pull the foil and the beans out. So we're almost at temp. So I'm going to take the crust. I'm going to go to the oven. Okay, we're here. So I'm just going to put it straight under the oven, and then we're going to do 15 minutes, and then we will be back. So we pulled the pie plate out of the oven. Didn't realize I hadn't recorded, apologies. We pulled the weights for the pie out. You pull the kind of opposite corners of the paper or the foil, and you can move quickly and put them into a bowl so they don't spill anywhere. And we put it back into the oven for another 15 to 20 minutes. We're looking for GBD, golden brown and delicious. And then we'll let it fully cool, and while that happens, we will work on the filling. I was first able to taste passion fruit at culinary school. It was used a lot in pastries. It has this bright, super tart, astringent flavor that's similar to citrus, but different. It kind of evokes those same feelings on your taste buds. I got to taste it a little bit more when I was in Hawaii. It's called lilikoi there. It's used in a lot of mousses and ices because it really has that refreshing quality. So if you like a really tart dessert, this will definitely be an ingredient for you. I am back. The crust has cooled, so let us make some passion fruit filling. 250 grams passion fruit pulp with seeds. Unfortunately, I could not find fresh passion fruit. I've seen the Fruta pulp brand in the freezer section. I think it's Goya. I didn't see that, so I went with what this is called, a All natural, 100% fruit, passion fruit, snack size pieces. And when I opened it, there are no seeds. So we're not going to have any of that. Because it says strain the seeds out of the passion fruit pulp and keep them in the fridge if you want to stir them in once the filling has been made. If the seeds remain, you cannot mix it properly and it's difficult to get it really smooth. I can tell you that passion fruit seeds do kind of have a crunchy texture and it would make it hard for a custard-like thing, which is what we're making. So it's going to say we're going to heat the passion fruit pulp, sugar, cream, cornstarch, flour in a large saucepan. So I have a large saucepan, and because again, everything is by metric, I'm pulling out my scale. And I'm actually going to put everything directly in the pot because I can go on back to metric, put my pot on, zero it out. So passion fruit pulp, 250 grams. Let's make not too much of a mess of the pulp. That completely liquefied. There wasn't even much pulp in there. I should have known better with the frozen, but we'll make it work. So we know we had it at 250, so we're going to zero it out again. And that's going to be 180 grams of sugar. I feel like that's not a lot. So I'm going to work with a spoon again. We're at 172, 76, there we go, 81. A little bit over, but 100 milliliters of cream. This one researching I found very fascinating. There's tons of milk substitutes. Cream is a whole other thing. So again, only at Walmart did I find Country Crock Plant Cream, heavy whipping cream alternative, dairy-free. It's lentil protein, oils, cornstarch, lots of other things for thickening. It says we need 100 milliliters of cream. It's got a little pull tab. So again, we're going to zero out, and we're going to move very slowly because I don't trust myself. 100 milliliters. I'm going to pour very slowly. 83, 85, 87, 89, 100. The cool thing about this container is it seals shut. It's not one of the ones that you have to cut the corners. So that makes me happy. So I can actually close it back up. I don't know what exactly I'll use. So it said passion fruit pulp, sugar, cream, cornstarch, flour, and salt all at the same time. Okay. So 30 grams of cornstarch. I use cornstarch a lot as my thickener. It doesn't, like flour, require to have so much cooking out time. So I find that to be less stressful. This is what I'm guessing we're using instead of, because this is really custard, for the egg kind of quality of it to thicken. 30 grams of cornstarch. So again, I zeroed out, and we're gonna very slowly put it in. Okay, 30 grams. 30 grams of plain flour. So again, all purpose. Again, zero. We're at 20, 30 grams. Okay, and then a pinch of salt. So we'll take that, pinch of salt. So let's wipe down a little bit. Take the pot off of the scale, wipe the scale down. It's got a little bit of cornstarch and sugar on it. Power it off. This OXO scale, use it for so many things. Not sponsored, but it's definitely been the highest quality scale I've had. It's the one that's lasts the longest. So spending a little bit of extra money is definitely worth it. Heat the passion fruit pulp, sugar, cream, cornstarch, flour, and salt in a saucepan. The cream, it may split, but will come together again while the filling thickens. So it doesn't say what temp, so I'm going to start at 4 on my stove. And since I know this is going to come out more like a custard, I am going to use a silicone spatula because I don't have to worry about the temp on it. So while we heat up, I'm going to try to mix in. Maybe I should whisk it. It doesn't say whisk, but I feel like maybe I should whisk this. Well, let me get started. Then maybe I'll switch to a whisk. So making sure I get everything off the sides. Yeah, I've decided I'm going to switch to whisk. I feel like that's going to work out better for me because, as you know, lumps in puddings and custards are kind of gross, so let's not do that. So let's start whisking. It does say the cream may split but will come together again while the filling thickens. So we'll see what that means. It does kind of look curdled, so I'm thankful they told me that because there's no way I would think I completely messed up here. I'm also a little worried I didn't get all the flour and cornstarch in. It doesn't give a temperature for thickening because usually with custard you get it at this temperature or coats the back of the spoon. It does not say anything. It's bring to a boil. Okay, so I'm going to turn it up higher. I'm nervous, but I feel like since I've incorporated almost everything, I'm going to keep moving though. With egg, I know it would seize up. I don't know with cornstarch. The only thing I know is cornstarch is usually activated by boiling, so that makes sense to get it up to there. I hope I got all the lumps out, because that would be pretty gross if I didn't. I'm actually reading ahead, and I'm going to need more margarine, so I need to get that out of the fridge. Another 150 grams. Okay, so that's at 140. So a little bit more. 150. Haha. Getting better at measuring this stuff. So let's try to read a little bit further on than we did. Luckily it worked out, but didn't read quite far enough in advance. So we're going to wait for this to thicken, and then we'll be at our next step. So thinking about this recipe, this is actually in the curd family. I don't know if you guys have ever had lemon curd. That's usually lots of lemon juice, a lot of butter, thickens slowly. It kind of gets in this lovely jammy thing that you can put on biscuits or scones or a matter of any yummy things. They also make, if you have pre-made curd, you can make them quickly into a lovely lemon bar. So thinking about it with this adding the margarine in after this comes to a boil, definitely think it's going to come to that quality. I'm waiting for it to come to a boil until the mixture is thickened properly. I feel like that's going to be hard for me to gauge, so I'm just going to watch it. I've turned up the stove to 7. I'm going to keep it moving because I know that could definitely be a problem. Though since there's no protein in quite the same way, it probably won't coagulate and scramble, but I don't know what it'll do. What I do know is if you over boil cornstarch, it will actually break its thickening agent and you have to do it again. By that time you really will taste the cornstarch and it does impact the flavor, so let's avoid doing that. We are not at boil yet, but we're getting close. We're very steamy. I do see some little tiny bits of cornstarch, but I'm hoping with the blending step that they'll go away. I don't think I can fish them out. I think we're past that point. I don't know, it could be cornstarch, it could be flour, but I think it's cornstarch. So we're not at thickening yet, but we are, I think we're close to a light bubble. So I'm just going to slow down my whisking so I can get a better sense of seeing where we are in boiling. Okay, it's definitely, you can probably hear it, that my whisk is struggling to get through this. So I feel like we're getting close. It's bubbling by pudding. So I'm going to guess that we're close to the next step. I'm just going to pull it off so I don't burn it while I read the next instruction. Yeah, it's definitely thickened. Thick filling. Stir or mix using a hand blender without lifting the head, so you do not mix air into the filling until the margarine is completely melted. Okay, as I had said before, I'm turning the temperature down. I still have the pot off because it says we want to cut up the margarine and put it in and then use a hand mixer. So I'm going to just try to get everything broken up into pieces because it's kind of a half stick. So I want to make sure we're not trying to incorporate a whole stick because I don't think that's going to go well. Kind of cut it, plop it in. Obviously don't want paper in it. That would be not great. So we're almost get it all in. One more kind of piece. And it says use a hand immersion blender. I have one. It does have a suggested alternative if you do not. What I use in a hand immersion blender the most for is if you're doing a soup and you want it to be really creamy. It works really well when you have a hot pan of liquid and you don't want to transfer it in a blender or something. It really does make a different texture. So luckily I already have one, but I'm washing my hands because the margarine is slippery and I do not want to slip using an appliance, even though this one I'm not likely to hurt myself, but as you never know. So the blender, sometimes called a stick blender or a hand blender, I find them very helpful for things. What did it say? Keeping the head in. So the reason you want to keep it in is so it doesn't splash. Ooh. So we're going to put it in, down, and we're going to blend. Definitely trying to incorporate as much as possible. The margarine is kind of melting quickly on the sides, but I'm trying to get it incorporated in. And specifically in the recipe said you don't want air in it, because I'm guessing you want it really thick, so it's still not homogeneous, so let's keep going. There's still some margarine bits. And it's interesting, you can see where it's floating and it hasn't mixed in because it's a different texture, so we'll just keep going around. And as I said, keep the head down so you don't burn yourself, because you know I burned myself the last time, so let's not do that again, right? This is looking very smooth. It does kind of look like lemon curd, and I know that you can make passion fruit curd, so I guess that's really working. So it's interesting. Definitely acting like it's not completely blended smoothly because I see the fat. Oh, yep. See, I lifted it, made a mess. That looks lovely. So let's tap it off to try to get the end. And what you do is you can release the blade usually from the motor. So let's do that very carefully. And glad I had that spatula from earlier. I'm going to wipe it because it does have a little bit of cornstarch on it. We don't want to introduce that into our lovely thickened filling. There we go, passion fruit filling. Trying to get it out of the blender blade, which I've disconnected so I don't have to worry about it going off. We don't want a small motor attacking me. So we have the filling. Stir in some of the seeds. So as we know, there are no seeds. And pour into the pastry and leave to set in the fridge for at least 6 to 8 hours. Let me go get the crust, which has completely cooled. I think I said before, the crust definitely did slump, which sucks because I did follow the instructions. But I think because margarine just is so temperature sensitive that it was just gonna do it. So what I might do next time if I make the recipe, I would leave the beans or pie weight in longer. So I've stirred this in. I don't see any more separating it. It says pour it into the crust. So here we go. Get that all in there. That almost looks like lemon meringue pie filling. I think that's what we want. Hopefully we're good here. I'm trying to smooth it and even it out. There are some bubbles. Hopefully we can get those under control. Well, right now this is way too hot to put in the fridge. We'll let it cool down a little bit and then I will put it to the fridge. And then it says you can decorate with whipped cream or meringue. Seen page 406. And I think I'm gonna do the meringue, but I gotta get this cooled down a little bit, so I will be back later. While the passion fruit pie is chilling in the refrigerator, I'm going to make the meringue. And so aquafaba, sugar, and cream of tartar. Aquafaba is actually the liquid that you drain off of chickpeas that are canned. So I have a gigantic can of garbanzo beans because I wasn't sure how much liquid would come out of these because I've never kind of measured that before. So I thought it would be helpful to measure it. What we're gonna do is we're gonna drain the beans out of all that liquid. I hope I have enough. We will find out shortly. Chickpeas have a very distinct smell out of the package. I'm gonna rinse the can out to recycle it. You should always rinse out your recycling items. If they're too dirty, they will just throw them out instead of recycling them. So give everything a good rinse. Put it in my recycling tub to go out. So I pulled out all the liquid. I have no idea how much this is. So it's gonna be a sugar thermometer, boil the sugar, 50 milliliters of aquafaba. So I'm going to zero out my tray and it says I'm gonna mix the 30 ml of aquafaba. How much sugar? 135 grams of sugar. This seems like a lot of sugar. 135. Okay, so we have the aquafaba, the garbanzo bean water, and the sugar in something that'll cook on the stove. And then we have the rest of the aquafaba, the 75 ml, and it needs to have 1/8 of a teaspoon of cream of tartar. Cream of tartar is actually, I don't know if it can be engineered otherwise, is a byproduct of the winemaking business. Cream of tartar is really great for stabilizing things. So using it in meringues is a regular thing. So we're gonna sprinkle the 1/8 teaspoon into that bowl of aquafaba. What we're doing is we're making a sugar syrup that'll get to a certain temp, and then we're gonna be whipping into more of the aquafaba, which is basically replacing egg whites to make this meringue. Because of this kitchen space I have and knowing how I burn sugar, I'm notorious for burning sugar. I'm going to get the aquafaba foaming. So it said firm foam. So I'm going to do that. Now I'm using a hand mixer for this. So to me that looks firm foam. Now I'm going to start the sugar part. It says to use a sugar thermometer, which I actually don't currently have. But what I'm going to use is I'm going to use my instant read thermometer. So we want to get the sugar, make sure it doesn't burn, get it to 266 Fahrenheit. So this is something that I have notorious issues with. Every time I've tried to make a caramel, a candy, it usually takes me 2 or 3 tries to get where I need to be. Luckily I have extra aquafaba and extra water and extra sugar. So if this backfires on me, we'll be prepared. And I burned it. Damn it! Why did I know I was gonna do that? So as I thought might happen, it started to foam, it seemed fine, then all of a sudden it burnt. So we're gonna, luckily I have enough liquid, so we will just do it again. But I'm very frustrated. I don't know why I struggle so much with this. So again, metric, we're gonna go back to zero it out. The 50 grams, and then we zero that. 135 grams of sugar. Let's try this again. I'm putting it in a taller container this time, so hopefully that will help with the bubbling. But I'm very frustrated with myself. I just cannot boil sugar. I don't know what my problem is, but I clearly have a problem and I haven't figured it out. Let's put it back on the burner and start again. Let me try to wash off the probe thermometer and I'll be right back. Okay, so I think we're there. I'm going to run the mixer and slowly pour in the sugar. I'm actually going to switch hands because of the heat. That's looking close. So to know what kind of peak something is, you kind of dip the beater in and pull it up, and if it holds a peak or it looks like a little snow cone, you're good. I think we may have gotten this, but that was a production. So it's gonna spoon or pipe onto the pie. So let's get this pie out. It's been chilling for a while. I put a piece of plastic wrap directly onto the filling because I didn't want to have a film or that gooey bit. Also, I'm gonna try and make it look nice for my coworkers. This is famous last words for me, so I'm going to take I don't have any piping bags. What I do have are zip top bags and piping tips. So I'm gonna make a piping bag using a star tip and open the bag, place the tip in. Okay, and then we need to fill this bag up with this meringue. Still feels really soft, but it came to hard peak, so maybe it's just naturally softer. I don't know. As I said, this is not my strength. Let me close up. So we're gonna just do kind of a star pattern on the crust from the center, working our way out. Piping is not my specialty, so everyone be kind on the photo that I share. We're almost done. Oh, this is definitely one of my messier, time-intensive things I've made. Okay, so it's not perfect, but you know what? It shows that it was homemade with love, right? So my hands are extremely sticky. I've been handling lots of sugary things, so I'm gonna wash again. So I piped it across in kind of stars that radiated out from the center to the outside. Now the recipe, which is actually the meringue recipe from the lemon meringue pie, but it says it works great on here. Pipe or spoon the meringue over the pie, brown with a chef's blowtorch or to get a nice color, or bake in a preheated oven. How long? I'm afraid to do that anyway. At 480 for 3 to 5 minutes to brown. I can tell you, I am way too afraid to do that part. So what we're gonna use is my little mini blowtorch, and we're gonna, not be too close to the microphone. And so we're gonna lightly toast it. We're gonna keep going around. Rotating it also helps so you have even distribution of the flames. I think I'm getting low on fire. I don't even know if I have a replacement thingy for this, so let's just try to get to the end, because I feel like I'm running out of steam. We have made the pie, so it should probably cool down and chill a little bit more. And then we're down to tasting. This was an involved recipe, as you know.
You were cooking all day. Like, I worked an entire day and you were still cooking when I was done working.
Well, hopefully it is worth it. This is from the Vegan Baking Bible. As you know, vegan baking is fraught with peril, and as you know, I did have an incident with one of the parts of the recipe, but this is a passion fruit meringue pie.
That sounds amazing. It looks amazing.
Don't get your hair stuck in the meringue.
No, I have long hair, for those at home. Yeah, this is I could tell, while you were baking it, I could smell the passion fruit. It smelled really good, so I have high hopes for this.
Well, let me know what you think. We're sharing a piece. I'm going to shake some of the coworkers. We're trying to be a little bit better behaved. Famous last words.
Yeah, I am the Jeffrey, after all, of the Cooking Through the Collection podcast universe.
But you can cook.
Okay, I can cook. All right,
yes.
Let me try to bite this.
I've only had the components. I haven't had it all together. His face was, he just closed his eyes. He looks very happy.
This is really good.
Would you know if I did not say anything that it was vegan?
No, absolutely not.
How's the crust?
Crust is good. It's not as crispy as I like, but it doesn't have animal fat in it. I understand it's not going to get there, but it's still good. It's still, flaky and tasty, and certainly the passion fruit is.
Is it still really tart? It's not too sweet?
It's a tart in a good way. I'm really liking this. Let me get another bite of this.
Do I get to have some too after that?
Of course, I didn't.
I was trying to share a slice. I was trying to be well behaved. No, you can have the second one.
Get in there.
So I know all the components seem to taste good. And I know I am picky, but I can't eat that whole bite. But I'm going to do it anyway. Here we go.
You earned it. You worked all day on this. What do you think of your handiwork?
I like the filling. I feel like the meringue needs something. I don't know if it needs some more salt.
Definitely
And
adds
the
richness to the pie.
And the crust, you're right. The crust is flaky. You can see that it crumbs up and everything, but it's just not the same as butter. Do you think if you took this to a coworker who was vegan that they would be happy with it?
Yeah, absolutely. This is really good. This is right there with the beef bourguignon, which I probably said wrong. It's one of the best things that you've made since this podcast started. Granted, there's only been 3 things, and I did like the Indian food as well. But this is something I wouldn't mind eating this again.
Okay. So, thumbs up again?
Thumbs up. Well, let's be honest. I'm biased. You're a great cook, and I love your cooking. So I'm always gonna have a bite. But this, if you made this again, I'm in.
Okay. Here are my final thoughts regarding the Vegan Baking Bible through Carolina Tegelar. This was a great cookbook. I can tell you, when I took the pie to work, one of my coworkers said it was one of the best things I've ever made. And some of my other coworkers wouldn't even be able to talk after eating it. They were just making positive affirmation sounds. So I consider that a huge success, considering that my past vegan baking adventures have been subpar at best. So if I was going to borrow it or buy it, I would buy it. Yes, it's going to be, it's a little bit more substantive. It's a little bit more pricey than some cookbooks are nowadays. But it really is a Bible that has lots of resources about how to make the best choices to be the most successful in vegan baking. So yeah, buy it. Thank you for joining me on Cooking Through the Collection. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing. You can visit the website for more information at cookthecollectionpod.com. Follow me on Instagram or Facebook, Cook the Collection Pod, or on Twitter at CookCollectPod. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode, and happy cooking.